the Monday, September 9th, Maplewood City Council Manager Workshop. City Clerk Sint, would you do the roll call for our workshop?
Councilmember Juniman?
Here.
Councilmember Lee?
Present.
Councilmember Villavicencio?
Here.
Councilmember Cave?
Here.
Mayor Abrams?
I'm here as well. Council members, is there a motion to approve our agenda for tonight?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Lee, seconded by Cave, the motion to approve our agenda. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Two topics tonight. Cannabis is our first topic, and this one, the presenter is Ms. Sint. Welcome.
Thank you. Can I have the presentation? We're going to talk about cannabis for the second time this officially. We've been talking a lot about cannabis and trying to decipher what we're reading. So let me just say I'm not an expert. This is my understanding as of this moment. And we're just going to go through this and see what kind of questions and answers we can get. And I need a pen. So the last time we were here, we talked about a lot of the knowns and unknowns that were going on. That was in May. And so some of those unknowns have become known now. Again, as City Manager Sable has said, the calendar is undefeated. January 1st is coming, and that is when our moratorium will end. So we need to do something about that. There were 2024 legislative changes that have now been adopted, so we know what they went with. The first draft of rules have come out. Of the 111 pages, 1 page was directed to local government. It actually wasn't even a full page. But it did have a disclaimer on the full draft that said, really don't use this as is your basis for any decisions. So, because the final draft will be coming out. But they did give us a local government guide that contained a model ordinance. So that's kind of what we've been working with and trying to cobble together our understanding. So again, May we had our initial workshop. Today we're going to try and start collecting some of your vision so that we can start crafting the ordinance. Depending on your decision tonight, potentially, it may need to go to the Planning Commission for zoning, and then hopefully December we'll be back with an ordinance to be adopted, possibly a draft ordinance. Prior to that, not sure how that's all going to work. So that's where we are. In looking at it, to me, it appears that there's 4 areas that we have controls. And they can have different zonings, there's a lot of differences, so that's why I broke it up. Cannabis retailers, that's the piece that we seem to really focus on most. The lower potency hemp edible retailers, cannabis events, and then the cannabis businesses as a whole, the non-retail. So again, time, place, manner for all of those are what city has control over. So we'll start with the cannabis retailers. One thing that should be noted about this is that there is a cap of 150 retailers statewide until July 1st, 2026. So at that point, they will relook at what the market is doing and adjust numbers from there. As far as Maplewood, one of the pieces that they did in the first draft, they did clarify that 12,500 per one site per 12,500 population. If you have 12,501, you're required to have 2 or to allow 2. So we round up then to 4. So there was a clarification that indeed we must allow 4. We are not required to have 4. So just to be clear about the words there. So we have to allow 4. We are not required to seek out 4. So tonight, some of the questions would be, how many locations do you want to have? depending on how council would like to do this, we can just kind of go through the questions that are there and then go back to get what you're thinking. Otherwise, we can take them one at a time, but I was thinking we could just kind of go through it and see if you want to talk about maybe each one separately or something like that.
What is going to be easiest for you? Because I know you're going to need to take our vision and then put this into draft ordinances. Would it be easier if we went through the questions? Or how would you like to do it? Because I want to make this easier to correct our ideas.
Sure. I would say let's go through what we're going to talk about for cannabis retailers, just some of those high points, and then see if you're ready to make some decisions on that. And then we'll just kind of progress through, if that's okay. So we're going to need to know about the number of locations. So you have to allow 4. You could cap it at a different number, higher than 4, or you could leave it uncapped. And those are all options. We have to decide whether it's going to be city, local registration, or if you're going to give that delegation to the county. Along with the registration comes conducting compliance checks. So whoever is registering also has to conduct the mandated once-a-year compliance check. For hours of operation, that's a fun one. That there's no similarity exactly to tobacco or liquor with this. The most restrictive that we can be is 7 days a week, open 10 to 9. That would be being the most restrictive. Right now, what we have to allow, they say no sales from Monday to Saturday from 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. and no sales between 2 a.m. and 10 a.m. on Sundays. So what they have told us is that the only time that the most we can restrict and shorten is to be a 10 a.m. start and a 9 p.m. close. Otherwise, we could just leave it with the hours that they have. When it comes to fees and fines, typically with other programs that are state mandated, we go with the maximum charges that they allow us. The question is, do you want us to go with those maximum charges as we start creating the plan to go forward? And then we'll also need to know about that zoning, if you want to put zoning restrictions. And the easiest way for me, a non-planner, to understand it is that if you want to treat cannabis retailers different than other retailers, and you want to zone them to certain places, then that is going to have to go to the Planning Commission. And then the Planning Commission is going to need to have direction from council as to where you would like that to happen. If you're okay with like liquor and tobacco right now are just allowed wherever retail is allowed. If we're staying with that, then in the ordinance itself, we can put buffers. And we can do a maximum of 1,000 feet from a school, a maximum of 500 from a park or attraction in a park or fields, 500 from daycares, and 500 from a residential treatment facility. We could also, I believe, because I didn't see any restriction from that, also put buffers between sites. I have not seen anything that says you cannot do that. So those would be questions with that. I don't know if you're ready or willing to talk about this, or if we have time. Okay.
You know, we certainly want to be able to give you some direction. So I think what I'll do is I will start out, we'll go through this so that we can start focusing on this. I mean, this is September, and we have to have this done by the end of the year. So I think this is going to be helpful. We certainly have seen all of these kinds of questions before, and we have all had the packet. And, you know, this is why we got elected, is to make these kinds of decisions. So let me go through my thoughts, and council members, you can add where you are coming out on this.
Okay.
In terms of the number of locations, I would like to cap it at 4. That's where we are right now in terms of our population. City or county registration, I would like it to be city registration, and that we do the enforcement
in terms of the compliance checks. In terms of hours of operation, I am in favor of the 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then the closure at that time. Fees and fine amounts, in terms of other alcohol and tobacco, we do the maximum. I would just as soon go with the maximum amount of fines for that piece of it. Zoning restrictions, I favor the zoning restrictions. We're talking about 4, if we go with 4, only 4 retail locations in our city. The 1,000 feet from schools, the 500 feet from daycares, residential facilities, and an attraction with a public park that is regularly used by minors. I like that kind of zoning restriction. And in terms of buffer distances, can you remind me what you talked about there?
If you wanted to put restriction between the locations themselves, the cannabis retailers.
I think the market kind of rules in that regard. That would be my my thoughts on that. Councilmember Cave.
Do you want me to go through what I think?
Sure.
And I'll go quickly because I think number 1, 4 cap, that speaks for itself. I think I would like our city to do the compliance checks. The hours of operation, I kind of thought the same with like liquor stores, the 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. That made sense to me, unless somebody else has a reason why not. The maximum registration fee, I'm for that. And I also agree that, we don't need to involve the planning commission in the next one with the buffers because there's only so much space that these can go in, with all the restrictions. And I also think the buffers that you had in this map were fine with me.
Councilmember Juniman.
Exactly the same as you said, Mayor.
Okay. I think, I don't recall who was next on this side. Okay, Councilmember Villavicencio.
I believe that we should not have a cap on the number of locations. I believe that we should register with the city, but I do have a question. This can be answered later if need be, but I was wondering if the city staff knows anything about what the county is doing. I know that's kind of a loaded question. And then hours, I think, should be same as tobacco and liquor. I think the fees and fines should be maximum. And I feel that as far as zoning, I am more in favor of using the buffers because I feel that the way that Maplewood is just laid out with where stores are and schools are, I think using some of the buffers would be better and lining it more with like tobacco zoning.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Mayor. All of the above, I agree with the council. The only one that I want us to consider a little bit is just the amount of stores in our city. I don't think we should have a limit. I think ultimately at the end of the day, the market itself will play it out. It will find an equilibrium. But what's most important for me to learn and understand is also what our sister cities doing. And if we're setting a limit here and then St. Paul or North St. Paul or other cities don't have any limit, then what we're really doing here is creating a barriers for entrepreneurs to start a business here in the city of Maplewood. So I think that's kind of my thing where ultimately, right at the first year council, I think there's going to be a lot of hype. People are going to want to come into this business. But I think at the end of the day, just like anything else, they're going to be selling tobacco, liquor, every few blocks. So if we're going to be going into this, I don't think there should be any fear in limiting and restricting this particular piece. So I don't think we should have a limit at all. I think it will create more problems than anything.
Councilmember Cave.
Just a comment back to that, so we're on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
My thing about the cap to 4 is because that's what we are, by statute, we only can have 4 in our city. So, and it says up until July 1st, 2026. So that's why I was in favor of just doing what the ordinance says, is we can only have 4, so leave it at 4, so we can have a 4 of maximum instead of 2, 3, whatever it was. That was my understanding.
Ms.
So
Sept.
just a quick correction. We must allow, but we don't have to have
4. Yes, so if you
Just,
say.
I mean, it's just kind of a different nuance.
So the word saying cap is really, we're just not having more, but we can't have more.
We could.
We could?
We could.
This year?
We could, yes, we could say, you could choose a different number to cap it, or you can say no cap. It,
But it doesn't the statute here, when I read it, say we're capped at,
they're going to cap the state at 150 and then relook at the market in a year and a half.
okay.
But we don't have to cap it.
I would suggest, since there's only going to be 150 in the first year, that we cap it at 4, so that we are part of the implementation, and we can revisit that at a later time. But we're all just coming into this new and trying to sort this out. Councilmember Juniman.
Well, part of the reason for sticking to that cap of 4 is, look how many cities there are in the state, and they are limiting it to 150 total. So it would make sense to me that we cap it at 4 for now, and as you said, and then reevaluate later.
Okay. Councilmember Villavicencio.
I think that capping it will do exactly what Councilmember Lee had said, that it might change the way businesses want to operate in Maplewood. If we cap it right off the bat, then they're going to go to the cities that don't have a cap.
That was exactly what I was going to say. Was I think in the right what's going to be important for this particular piece is the first year. I think that's going to be the critical part of it, where we have to be a city that's open to business. We have to be a city, because I think there's a lot of benefit that this potentially can bring. And just because we have unlimited doesn't mean people are going to want to come into the city of Maplewood. I think there's a lot of very competitive cities around us, and that's the big piece of it, is how can we be the most competitive city if people want to do business in here. You know, this is really where I think for long enough there has been a barrier with this particular subject, and this is where we have to really take it head on. And I understand what you mentioned, Mayor. You know, we kind of start out with that way and figure it out as we go, but we're figuring it out as we go already. And I mentioned it last time, but you know, Prohibition ended 100 years ago. This is what I learned from the League of Minnesota Cities, and we're still making regulations and tweaking the laws and regulations around this. And I think capping it doesn't benefit us at all. I think opening it up is going to only help us more.
Councilmember Cave.
After getting some more information about what capping is and how it all works, my understanding was different. So I guess I'm in favor of not capping it, because I do see the relevance of the first year. We could have a lot more applications and good applications coming in if they don't see that there is right off the bat a cap. So I guess I'm in favor of not capping.
Ms. Parr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. I just want to clarify one point. We were kind of chatting about it, and I saw Andrea's face as well, so I just wanted to clarify. We heard a couple different things. I want to make sure that I understood it properly. So I heard zoning a couple times, but what I really think what people maybe meant by some of the things they said, treating it like tobacco and liquor, where it's commercial. So correct me if I'm getting this wrong. It's commercial, but we do address it in a separate part of the ordinance, not zoning, so it wouldn't go to the planning commission. Correct me if I get this wrong. But it basically, it allows for the buffers, it allows for separations, whatever is chosen that still meets the requirements, and we would do the inspections and the compliance, but it's not zoning. So I just want to clarify that, because if it is, we would look at it much differently. Right now, we do not have special zoning districts for tobacco and liquor. So I just want to, okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, so did that give you enough?
Yes.
Direction?
Yes, because obviously you're going to see this again and you're going to have to
Right.
approve it. So it's just a direction for us to be
Thank you.
going. So yes.
Thank you.
We also have the lower potency hemp edible retailers. We know we have 21 that are registered right now in Maplewood. We aren't doing anything currently with them. They have registered with OCM. There's only a couple of things that you can do. You can have the zoning restriction and the buffer distances, but you could also restrict it to establishments that only allow people in that are 21 and older to sell that. I'm not quite sure how that would work with like a bar that a family goes into to sell. So I don't know what kind of restriction that would do. I'm totally honest with you out there. That was part of the model ordinance that they said that was something. I don't know if that is something we'll try and figure out more, but it seems to me like that is a more restrictive piece to it.
One of my concerns right about this is that we already have 21 registered. And so if we were to do any type of restrictions in terms of zoning, would that negatively impact anyone who currently is selling?
Yes, I would say for sure it would, because a lot of the ones that are selling are either off-sale liquor stores or tobacco shops, and some are just a general merchandise store. Then also they'll be able to have on-sale liquor stores will be, establishments will be able to carry it
Okay,
also.
that would be a concern for me. I wouldn't want to put anyone out of business. Councilmember Villavicencio.
One question I had around this, and I think I spoke briefly with City Manager Sable about this, but is there a pathway, or does the city staff know when the state comes in and will shut someone down for misuse or selling of products they may not be supposed to be selling? And I guess my question is, or my thought around that is, I would hope that as a city, we could know that information. Like if one of these low-potency hemp retailers are selling, and then they get shut down, and let's say they get shut down 3 times, well, then maybe we as a city should say, well, we don't know if they should be operating in Maplewood, kind of thing.
Mr. Sable.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilmembers. Councilmember Villavicencio. It is a tricky issue because right now the Office of Cannabis Management doesn't share with us their inspection results. As the law changes, however, and the terminology is going to get me, so I'm going to look at the city clerk. But so there is a registration with one agency and a license with the other. And I can't remember which one. I think we license.
So currently, they only register the lower potency. They're currently only registered, I believe, mid-2025, at some point in 2025, they will start being licensed by the state and then register with the city.
So it's at that threshold, then, that we'll be aware of the violations, because we'll also be doing the compliance checks. But that is 10 months from now. So,
Hey, Council-
but we can continue to ask for the results of their inspections.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Mayor. I have the same concern that you do, Mayor, with that piece, because anything in products that we choose to sell, I think it's quite a chunk of investment. What I'm curious to know a little bit more is, maybe for next time, is with the current sellers right now, what are some problems? What are the issues that they're having? Are there any regulation issues right now? And to bring this into question, I mean, what are the plus and minuses of going the other way? So I guess I don't know enough about this. That's kind of where I'm at.
Councilmember Cave.
I guess I don't know much about it either, and that's what. But I did not want to just go and throw a whole other ball of wax in the 21 retailers that are using it and be restrictive. I just want to make sure, I guess, and I hear what Nikki says too, because I think we should know if we have issues with places. But it sounds like we are possibly going to. So I guess if we keep our pulse on that, I'd be happy, because once the city starts taking over, wouldn't we take over those also? Okay.
Does that give you a little bit of
Yeah, yes, it does.
direction? Yes.
A little bit.
Amazingly, yes, it does.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, because you didn't think if the waters were muddy enough, there's cannabis events that we're also going to have to decide on. Those are going to be actually events licensed through the state, but they have to have local approval. And one of the big things is that they can allow on-site consumption of cannabis. That has to be locally approved. So you can choose to just prohibit on-site consumption, period, for cannabis events, from my understanding. We can also, you can restrict locations that it's happening, and you can also limit the hours. They would probably have to come in and get some kind of a temporary permit. I'm not sure what that would be, from the city, and give us information about the event, but it is actually licensed through the state, but with local approval.
Let me ask you a question in terms of what we do with alcohol. If alcohol is going to be served at an event, what happens with that? Because I know under some circumstances, there has to be a police officer there. So can you kind of describe, it'd be good to have some context about what we already have in place for alcohol.
Sure. When it's a temporary liquor, if it's an on-sale site that's having liquor outside their establishment, the police are notified. If it is a large assembly, the police are notified. If it's a special event, a little bit smaller, but there's liquor, police are notified. If it's a church that is having the event, I believe we notify them also. Whenever there is any kind of a liquor event happening, they're notified at least that the activity is occurring.
Do you know under what circumstances an officer is required to be present? I know that I think that there have been some events over at the community center where an officer was
Weddings.
required. Chief, could you describe that?
Yeah, Madam Mayor and Council, typically we'll only work city-owned property or county-owned property, so Aldridge Arena, the community center, the Moose Lodge, we've worked those in the past because they were city-owned. Other than that, we are pretty restricted as to when we work when there's alcohol, so we typically will not.
Okay. So if it's a wedding at the community center and they're having alcohol, then there
they
has
have
to
pay
be an
for
officer.
correct, because
Okay.
it's city property.
Because it's, okay. Councilmember Cave.
I believe some venues too make you purchase, the venues themselves make you, if you have a wedding, that you have an officer there. Cannabis events, I'm not familiar with them. So I was trying to think, if you have something in the park and there's a beer festival, you're going to have 21 plus, you're going to have everything behind. I mean, you can't have beer unless you're in the beer area. You're going to have everybody ID'd. So I don't know how this is like cannabis, because you could go in and purchase it and walk out the tape and then, smoke it or eat it, whatever. So I don't know how other cities or how even these events go. So to me, I'm kind of I'd like to know more about this before I gave direction.
Correct.
Councilman, go
oh,
ahead.
Sorry. I would say one of the things, the state had a very big, I saw that they said commercial fencing is required if there's going to be on-site consumption, and they cannot be viewed by anybody, things like that. But again, you could just say blanket, that's not happening at the event. The events are up to 4 days.
Okay.
They could be selling
Okay.
the product. I'm not quite sure what, they're having events right now, but they cannot be selling product.
Okay. Councilmember Villavicencio.
I had a question around the temporary permit, but I wanted to say something to what Councilmember Kay said about, I know in other cities for events, yeah, it is true that if there's a consumption area, it's just like alcohol. The only difference, I think, is that they say it can't be viewed from like the public street or something like that. But my question around the temporary permit is how much would we collectively be able to have say over like what the temporary permit is? And my question around the temporary permit is like how many things could we add in there like that they would have to be required to do? And I'm wondering around the fact of garbage, because as a 5-step green city, I want to make sure that if any of these events are happening, that they respect our wanting to keep our city clean. So I was wondering if we can make sure we add that to the temporary permit if we do a temporary permit.
Ms. Sint, do you have an answer?
Yeah, I believe they left that like wide open on the model ordinance, that we could put whatever our requirements are. I did ask the question because I can't help myself. I have to ask questions. And so I did ask the question, can we just ban cannabis events totally? And the answer is no, they're a business, but you can do time and manner in place. So that's how they view. So we're going to have to create something around that. Again, future discussions, but just to get you thinking that this exists. I think this is one of those topics that a lot of people have missed, and just not a lot of people have any question. Like when you said, what are our neighboring, Councilmember Lee said, what are the neighboring cities doing? everybody's asking that question of each other.
Councilmember Juniman.
So we have the usual amount of direction from the state that's so enlightening. I suppose what we can do then is restrict locations and limit hours. Is that what you're basically saying? That's how we would control it? Yes. Okay.
That's what it sounds like. I think we could also, like with a large assembly, we require certain things. I don't know what the state is necessarily requiring, so we can't, we can't double certain things, but there's just something to bring up that you have to decide if you're going to allow on-site consumption at some point.
My concerns including keeping the site clean, who's responsible for that. Some of this sounds like this is going to be very taxing on our staff in terms of anything that may come in. This is going to create a lot of more work for you. And potentially, if we aren't thinking ahead on what potentially could happen, it could be creating more issues for public safety as well. And so I certainly want us to be mindful of that. It is legal, but how do we put at least some reasonable boundaries around it so that, it's not interfering with families, we aren't, our parks are open for people and we talked about that early on, that we want our parks to be friendly places. So where might these events be happening? Can we identify some possible sites? Or, I don't know how this is going to work out. I'm just concerned about the staffing part of it, the cleaning part of it, the public safety part of it, the approval part of it. I think we're going to need some additional information on it. Councilmember Lee, you had a comment as well.
No, I was just going to, you said exactly what I had in mind was, I would love to see for the next conversation, maybe identifying sites so we can understand how does that impact our staff? How does that impact the work that you guys are going to do? So that was the big piece of it.
And really our community,
Yeah.
too. Mr. Sable.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. The city of Shakopee did just host the Doobie Dabbler over the past weekend. And so we have counterparts and colleagues from Shakopee, and so we'll reach out to see how did it come together, what kind of things did they run into, what kind of issues that might they have come up. And so, as the city clerk said, that everybody is wrestling with this question, and there's not an answer that we can all agree on today, but at least we're asking the right questions.
Okay. Pardon me?
I said, parish that thought we should have any guidance.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, the next,
And just kind of under the same vein here, we have cannabis businesses, the non-retail, so that would be, I have listed those, the cultivation, the manufacturer, wholesale. Again, zoning restrictions would only be if you wanted to treat cannabis wholesalers different than you do wholesalers. Based on what you were talking with retailers, it would seem that that's probably a no. But again, that's just a clarification, I guess, that we'd need. And if you wanted to do buffer distances, again, that can be treated separately. We can have buffer distances for retailers that don't exist for the businesses. Again, caveat, that's my understanding currently.
okay. It seems to me that we need to answer some of these other questions first before we can grapple with this, at least.
Excuse me, I would say that the big issue is if you are not looking at zoning restrictions, because if the zoning restrictions are something that you're in favor of doing, then we need to have guidance on that so that the planning commission can handle that because of the public hearing that they would have to have. Otherwise, we can, gather more information, what are other cities thinking, all of that, like we've been trying to do, and then come back again.
I think we're looking at the buffer is what I heard council members talk about, the 1,000 feet from schools, 500 feet. So we were looking at buffers, and that may be applicable here as well.
Yep.
Okay?
So that is good.
Does that
The
give you
last-
something?
That does give us something. This is just the original timeline that was created. Just to let you know, we are on track. It may not seem that way, but we are.
Oh, I'm so glad. Still feels a little muddy, and I'm sure it must be very muddy for you, too.
Yes.
So there you go. Thank you very much. Moving on, we have a discussion on the Metro Transit Purple Line. Mr. Sable, you are our presenter.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. As you can recall, the Purple Line conversations that we've had since I've started, I think we are on to, this is the 6th conversation since I've been city manager. But I thought it was important to have kind of a history of how did we get to this point. And so the packet includes a little bit of chronology and history about how did we get to this point. And it began actually in the late 1990s when Ramsey County acquired abandoned rail corridors for future trail access. This project really began in earnest in about 2014 when there was a series of analysis done on both form and route and other things related to transit. And then this governing body acted in June of 2017 to support a locally preferred alternative along the Bruce Vento Line Trail alignment, and that was a vote that was taken in June of 2017. In May of 2020, this council approved what's known in the transit planning world as the 15% design. It's one of those threshold markers that said this project is moving forward. Here's the design and what that looks like. And if you remember, May of 2020 was in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and so that was a remote meeting. In October of 2022, there was a discussion by this body and an action taken to really look at a more engagement and more, this is when I think the community conversation really reached its peak about the looking at this line and its potential impacts on the city of Maplewood. So there was expanded engagement requested in October of 2022. Transition then into February of 2023, there was a series of 4 sessions that were held in this council chambers. As a former staff member, I worked with Melinda Coleman as the facilitator for those sessions, and that included presentations from Metro Transit planning staff. It also had presentations from the No Rush Line Coalition or the No Purple Line Coalition presented. Also had an opportunity to hear from businesses and other people who were impacted on the line. And then ultimately that led to, in March of 2023, Ramsey County Commissioner Victoria Reinhardt introduced the option to study the White Bear Avenue alignment. And that is what has triggered sort of the last 18 months of our conversations is what is the analysis? What would it look like on a different route? And so periodically there's been council updates in April of this year. And then in July of this year, there was a series of questions that were asked. Metro Transit staff prepared a very lengthy response document and memo that's included in this packet. But this council, and then there was another presentation in August 2024, which is more surrounding process and what timelines would look like for decision-making. And in the conversation that occurred in August, there was really a desire by this council to have an opportunity to talk about these things as a council. So rather than just get a presentation and absorb information, this is really a time to kind of gather the collective feedback about you've been inundated with presentations and data. Really, this is the first opportunity as a council to actually talk about what it would mean and what the implications and impacts that you would want to prepare for. And before I close, I just want to make sure that I say thank you to the Metro Transit staff and the county project team. They've really done very different levels of engagement based on the feedback that this group has provided. They've always been willing to answer questions and to show up to meetings, and so they've really done a really nice job. And after roughly 10 years of analysis and 18 months of a vigorous review and words like center running and side running and endpoint and public safety and ridership estimates and traffic impacts, I don't know that there's any data that we can share that will help your decision-making process, but I want to make sure that you have our commitment to give you all of the data that you need. And so with that, Mayor, I will just turn it over to the body to kind of share. And I'll note that there's 20 minutes remaining in the scheduled time. You have, if you go over, you have 2 options. One, you can just continue to extend the discussion, or you could pause and recess and then come at it after the council meeting. So you're not bound by the 20-minute time limit. So you have options.
I
Thank you.
appreciate that. Thank you very much. I also want to thank Maplewood staff, all of our staff have been working on the Purple Line for years. The Ramsey County staff and also the Metro Transit staff. They have put in a lot of work and a lot of hours concerning what was called the Rush Line and currently is called the Purple Line. The project has been discussed, it has been altered, it has been in at least a planning stage for more than 10 years. In fact, I think when Commissioner Reinhardt was here, she talked about, this goes back actually 28 years. It actually goes back into the previous century. So there have been hundreds of hours of public engagement. During all that time, councils have been absorbed, or they have had to absorb a lot of data, including our council. But we really haven't had that opportunity to discuss this. And I think this is really one of the first times that we've been able to do that. So this is really finally our turn tonight. Over the summer, Metro Transit has been on our agenda at least 3 times. And we have had what I consider to be an enormous data dump that we have had to process. I have spent so much time reading and studying and looking at the Purple Line. And I have reached a conclusion that the Purple Line is not the right transit solution for Maplewood. We initially considered the Vento Trail, but the numbers there never made much sense, especially after the global pandemic and the major shift to working at home, which resulted after the pandemic. We had 4 very robust facilitated public meetings in 2023, and we pivoted at that time to start looking at White Bear Avenue as an alternative because Vento just didn't make any sense. Based on the projections that we have been provided and the impact on our community, we're looking at a lot of trade-offs that, in my mind, they just do not support moving forward with the White Bear alternative. I believe that we have sufficient new information to conclude that the Purple Line, the White Bear alternative, is not our best option. I looked at the numbers, the 56 pages of questions that the Metro Transit staff provided for us, and the sheer disruption of reducing White Bear Avenue to a single lane and the impact on the 23,000 drivers who use it daily just doesn't make any sense to me. Metro Transit ridership projections that were included in those 56 pages for the 8 Maplewood stops establishes, and I quoted this because this was right from Metro Transit staff, there is not a significant difference in the trips estimated for the current year right now versus the horizon year, which is in 2045. So Metro Transit staff themselves said that the number of riders that are riding right now is about the same that it's going to be in 2045. And for me, being as practical and I think pretty much common sense thinking, the cost of $450 million for either 8 or 10 stops with no increase in ridership just doesn't add up to me. 23,000 drivers use White Bear Avenue today. Since we've been talking about it this summer, I have made a point of driving more on White Bear Avenue to see what it's like. And it is a very central road in our community. I think about the construction, 2 years of construction, and then running the line. That would displace all of those drivers to alternate routes that would have to go through our neighborhood. Not to mention the profound disruption that the homes along White Bear Avenue and the businesses along White Bear Avenue, the disruption that they would have. I'm concerned about those businesses. I'm concerned about those homes. And if you take a look at the materials that were provided by Metro Transit, depending if the selection would be either side running or center running, that the driveways on most of those homes and businesses would be disrupted. They would have to be moved off of White Bear Avenue. Well, if you take a business or someone who's living on White Bear Avenue and you move the entrance to that business or to their home to some other location, that doesn't make any sense to me. especially, some of them, like I think in side running, for businesses, if we went with side running, which I think was really favored, side running BRT, they would have to close all 33 business driveways that are on White Bear Avenue, which I think could be devastating to some of those small businesses that are on White Bear. We have been anchored to this idea of the Purple Line for 28 years. And the plan just simply doesn't make any sense. It's a 28-year-old transit plan. It's kind of like, I've heard the argument, well, we need to build out the system. But that's kind of like saying, well, this is a 28-year-old transit plan that was made, started in process at least 28 years ago. It's like saying that you're going to use an 8-track in your car or you're going to use a floppy disk in your computer. That's what we were doing 28 years ago. And so I think we need to really reframe this and look at this very differently. I don't want to be anchored to an old transit plan. I think it's that we can all agree that we need transit, but I don't believe that the Purple Line is our answer. It requires too many trade-offs for our community that just don't benefit us. It doesn't make any sense in light of the significant work-at-home changes that we've seen and that people are simply not using transit the way they used to before COVID. To build out a 28-year-old transit plan is just, in light of all of the data that we've looked at, that we've been provided, it does not meet the needs of our community. I believe that the future for transit on the East Metro side of the cities is really looking at microtransit. We all learned about that from the Metro Transit staff. I just talked with the Woodbury mayor today. They have a microtransit system that is going to be starting in Woodbury in January. They have a 5-mile radius that they're looking at. I think the future is also looking at autonomous vehicles. It's not looking backwards 28 years. It's looking forward and saying, what are we going to need? I think we need microtransit, which is door-to-door transit, and also the possibility in the future of autonomous vehicles. I learned in talking with many residents, I've replied to every single email, every single call that I've received from our residents. And, one possibility is to also look at the addition of a letter line. Letter lines, I think they're A through H. They are much more, I think that they're more akin to an express bus, but they're not really an express bus, but they don't have as many stops. They also run within traffic. You don't need to do construction for 2 years in order to do a BRT system. You just simply, these letter A, B, C, D, whatever the bus letter sign is, it just simply runs with traffic. We should be looking at those kinds of things. I think that certainly makes a lot of sense. Council members, this discussion has been going on for a very, very long time. And what I would propose is that we reject the White Bear alternative and instead direct staff to work with transit to come up with a better plan for our community that might include microtransit, like Woodbury and Roseville are getting. It might even explore, like I said, the letter lines and see if that would be something that would work on White Bear without bringing so much disruption to us. And also look at autonomous autonomous cars on White Bear. It wouldn't require the construction because the buses would just simply run like they do now. To move forward, I think that we would also we'd have to look at this, and I think we'd have to do, just because of where we are in the process, we'd have to do some type of a resolution withdrawing or ceasing any further movement forward on the White Bear alternative. I would really like us to continue the discussion with transit, but I also think that we have to do something in terms of a formal resolution rejecting the Vento Trail as well. We need to move on. This is a 28-year-old plan. We need to move forward on this. There's no question we need transit in the East Metro. We just don't need the Purple Line, and we need transit that is going to meet the service needs of our community. I know that that's an awful lot to digest, but we have been looking at this for a very long time, and as council members, we have heard an awful lot, and I really want to hear from you about what your thoughts are. Councilmember Cave, you were first.
Nice presentation. I wanted to come out and kind of say similar. I want to thank the Metro Transit for all the information they provided us. I think this last bit of information really kind of sealed it for me, just with all the questions that we've had from all the meetings. I had so many things like you did, Mayor. The impact to businesses and homeowners is just, it speaks for itself when you look at it, all the driveways, all the businesses that are impacted. That's not something I'm in favor of doing at all as a council member for Maplewood. We're in favor of bringing businesses here and helping them, not limiting businesses, especially if, we're gonna put a corridor in there and it's a 2-year construction period. The whole thing, it sounded to me when we first started it, kind of like what you just mentioned with the letter bus. I was kind of hoping it was going to go where a bus would just be more an express bus going up and down White Bear. It wasn't going to change White Bear Avenue to the degree that it was presented to us, putting in medians, doing the driveways, businesses. It just grew to something that I'm not in favor of. I was in favor of the side as opposed to the center, but that in itself was also a mess. The trips that were estimated when we got the data, you can see the data in St. Paul. They have a lot of ridership, but it's not the same in Maplewood. And they're trying to connect, the lines and make the same presentation and make the same look in Maplewood as in St. Paul. And I don't see that we're just apples and oranges. We don't have the ridership. This is our central vein in Maplewood, White Bear Avenue, and to shut it down to one lane on each side, it makes zero sense to me. I really, at the beginning, I was thinking it was going to be a express bus that goes through. I didn't think the amount of changes it was going to be were happening. And as much as I'm in favor of transit, this whole option I'm not in favor of. And I would be in favor of doing a resolution of, pulling support from that. I also have talked with 2 people that take microtransit in Minneapolis, that option that they had, and spoke with them, and they love it. I mean, it's between $1 and $3.75. It's usually around $1.50 for them, and it goes in Minneapolis. It goes a 2-mile radius, but it's door to door. It's on demand. It's like an Uber bus, so it comes and picks you up. It brings you from your door to wherever you want to go. And you can use it multiple times a day. You're not restricted on use. It just seemed like that to me seems like something that needs to come here. And when I found out Roseville and Maplewood were both implementing it, Woodbury, sorry, were both implementing it, I was excited because it's exactly something that I see we need, and to talk to the Metro Transit and Met Council and start getting something here. I know they have the pilot programs already done, like the one in Minneapolis, but to go forward with this project, and I'm against going on the Bruce Ventel Trail altogether, so that one I would like to have pulled. But to keep going forward with this, I agree. I don't see, it just keeps getting more and more not sent. It's like you said, there's no common sense to it. It's spending millions and millions of dollars for something that we don't need right there. So that's what I want to say right now.
Okay. Councilmember Villavicencio, you're next.
Thank you. Given the recent comments, I guess I'm going to change what I was going to say. We had a CMC meeting recently where I received a lot more information, including about the microbuses, which will be in Maplewood as well. But I will say that as being the only council member here and the only person on the CMC as well who use public transit and is public transit dependent, I will say I'm still in favor of the purple line. And that's all I'm going to say for now.
Okay, Councilmember Juniman, and then Councilmember Lee.
I feel like the sail went right over my head. What you said and what you said, I'm disappointed because I think what should have been done earlier, and there's nothing we can do about it, but talking to the project people, it suddenly dawned on me as I was reading these responses. It's kind of like telling people that you're going to fire them when you're asking them questions about doing something different. They have only one thing in mind, and that's the project they were assigned, and by grab, that project's going to come off. And so I think that's why our wheels were spinning and we weren't getting the answers to some of the things we really wanted. And so I think what we need to do at this point, besides disassociate ourselves from this, is to approach Met Council and say we want to talk to the operations people for Metropolitan Transit, because they're the ones who can help us with the microbuses and what I call beefing up the bus system, as you put it, the letter lines, Mayor. And I have to admit also, I never dreamed when they were first bringing this up, and even as they explained it, that they were going to totally do away with moving traffic in one lane each way on White Bear Avenue. I had envisioned more buses being in traffic but having the right-of-way at certain points. That's what I had, foolishly, I suppose, envisioned. But you can buy a lot of microbuses for $455 million. And you can make incremental improvements along the way as you see fit for anybody who has a need that isn't being met. This is not the answer for absolutely everyone anyway. And their numbers, as you said, Mayor, are not convincing. It would be better if they were. It would be easier to justify doing something. It still doesn't counteract the total disruption of life along White Bear Avenue, but you'd have a reasonable goal in mind that it was going to be providing more transportation for a greater number of people, but it's not convincing. It's just not. So I really think we need to have the operations people be speaking with us about the things we want to see happen, because we do, I agree with the mayor, we need transit, we need improved transit, and we're not getting it. And this, by the time this would be done anyway, we would have wiped out a lot of people, I think. So we can't do that. We have to think of the whole community. So I agree with what the mayor has said and what Councilmember Cave said, but we do need some kind of a sensible transit system. And I'm concerned now, I don't want them to wiggle out of committing to us that we need to discuss transit and make the system work better. I don't want them to see us as, well, you don't want this, we're going away. Because sometimes the bigger kid on the block becomes a bully. And I don't want to see that happen. We need to be talking about how to make transit work better in this community and connecting us with other communities. And like you said, it's too bad the pilot programs are already over for the microbuses, but if they're going to be working there, they certainly would work here. And it's only one option. There have to be other options for increasing service that do not include total disruption of life as we know it to get there. And I know that that's the engineer's job, but I do feel frustrated because if you go back in time, just even to this past summer, some of the topics we were approaching still haven't been answered, to be real frank. They did on the one presentation tell us about, I believe it was 7 options of transit, and I know you and I looked at each other like, they have that? We had never heard of them. So they need to resurrect those, and we need to be talking about those. And then I really believe that we need to get to the point where we look people in the eye and say, we need decent transit in this community, and we're willing to cooperate and get it, but this isn't the way to do it. A total disruption of our business community and our main travel fairway is not the way to do it. I have visions as I tried to uncross my eyes from reading all these graphs, honestly. But I had visions of a police car having to get from here to County Road D, and we have the bus lanes, and we have the traffic bumper to bumper in the other lane. That's a ruck. I mean, I know they can go over the curb, but we don't expect them to do that 15 times a day. It just doesn't, now that we've seen finally, it just doesn't, if you will, fall together in my estimation. But I don't want them to go away mad. I want them to go away with this idea and come back with a plan for us to work on how we can get our transit to work better. And it can't just be, okay, yeah, we'll do that. No, we have to have a plan, and we have to be taking some part and responsibility in what we want to see. We can't just say, well, you have to give us something better and different. We have to say what kinds of things that means to us for this community. If we're saying no to what they're throwing at us, then we have to have some ideas that are solid and ask them to look into it and give us real numbers of, for instance, they have these letter lines now, how many people are riding them. If that letter line was solid and worked on a more regular schedule, what kind of numbers might we see? If they can do it for BRT, they ought to be able to do it for souping up their own structure that they already have. We can't let them walk away and do nothing. That's not an option.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I appreciate the conversations and the comments from all the council members and everyone. All the comments from the constituents, emails, phone calls, have had some great conversations. And, you know, Met Council members, or not Met Council, the Met Council staff that's been working on this particular project, you know, I appreciate all the work that you guys have done for this project. There's a couple things that's come to mind tonight. I think one, in my personal opinion, I think we're making, I wouldn't be in support of a resolution to cut off the purple line just yet. Am I 100% sold on it? I'm not 100% sold on it yet. I'm not 100% sold on the Bruce Vento Trail. I think what we ask of the Met Council is for them to go back to the community and to bring back a plan to do another assessment. And that's what they've done this last year, is to go back to the drawing board, because the city of Maplewood, we moved in the direction of wanting to see something different, because I don't think we had the right mode of transit. The plan that was put in place was not the right plan at the time. I feel like we put a pie into the oven and we're taking it out half baked, and now we're just like, without tasting it, we're already tossing it. We're throwing it wayside already. I think the Met Council gave us a good timeline last time about what they wanted to do, kind of the time frame of how and what we're going to make decisions on this coming year. And I think we owe it to the Met Council to hear them out before we make any kind of resolution or decision or anything at all. I don't think putting a resolution right now in place is going to make sense. I am a data guy. I'm a numbers guy. When I look at charts and graphs, I mean, I love that stuff. That's what that's what excites me. That's what gets me going during the daytime. And the reality is, Mayor, as you mentioned, when you look at the numbers, it doesn't make sense. And I mean, I'll put it out there, plain and simple. In 2045, we're looking at an additional 420 user if we go with the side running option. We're looking to expand our city. We're forecasted to grow to 50,000 plus people in 2040. And so the investment of 22 years to benefit 400 people versus what you mentioned, when you really look at the numbers, the thousands of drivers that go through Wiper Avenue, and it doesn't make sense. But, you know, pieces, we all have questions. I don't think questions has been answered. I think there's a lot of outstanding things, and I think this council has done a great job for the community in terms of asking the right questions, and that's what we owe to our constituents. That's what we owe to our voters in the city of Maplewood. But making a resolution right now, halfway through the process, when we haven't even had any decisions on any recommendations from the Met Council staff on what they're recommending at all, I think we're just going in really early with the decision, and I don't think we should be doing that yet. I think we should hold off until at least they presented their final recommendation to us, and then we can discuss and make a decision at that time about what will be the best option for the city of Maplewood. There are other alternatives, and I would like to hear what other alternatives there are that would be more beneficial to the city of Maplewood and residents here. But this early on in the game, I don't think it's the right time, so I would not support a resolution to pull out of the purple line.
Council members, Councilmember Juniman.
I don't know if this would be of any value or not, but I think we had agreed once upon a time, excuse me, once upon a time, that the Bruce Vento Trail option was off the table. So I don't know if we want to entertain letting them by a resolution that we don't want that, because we know our community doesn't want that. It's an option.
You know, I don't think that the resolution is all that clear. I think it needs to be more clear. Mr. Sable, do you want to weigh in on that 2017 resolution? I think, was it 2017? Yeah.
Mayor, thank you, Mayor and council members. Mayor, the resolution was from 2022.
Okay.
The headline reads, resolution withdrawing support for the Purple Line Bus Rapid Transit Project as it currently exists within the city of Maplewood. That is the title of the resolution from, I believe it was in October. The whereas clause, which is really the defining action by the governing body, says, therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Maplewood, Minnesota, that the City of Maplewood recommends that the modification study timeline be expanded to create an engagement plan to evaluate future transit options / routes that works effectively for all. And I'm not an attorney, but we do have one on staff. And so and I've also been at this a long time, so I know that the titles of things can say one thing, but the governing body action that's in the resolving clause is the full effective force of the law, as I understand it. And I'm going to look to Mr. Beatty to tell me that I'm either correct or incorrect.
Madam Mayor, Council, I don't remember that resolution when it was adopted, but when I reread it in the packet today, I thought that the text of the resolution did not follow the title. The title says withdrawing approval, and I don't think that's what the resolution does.
So, council members, I know that there are other lights on, but I want to suggest, we're going to go over a little bit because I would hate to stop this discussion and then start our council meeting. I think that, we're all motivated to talk about this. I appreciate your comments, Councilmember Lee. We've been talking about this for 10 years since I've been on the council. And there comes a point in time, I know that you're a fisherman, and there comes a point in time where you get a fish or cut bait. And that, for me, is tonight. That the process, I think from my perspective, there is enough data that this doesn't look any better than what we found with the Vento Trail. The numbers didn't make any sense. The cost didn't make any sense. And it didn't really improve, I don't believe that it met the needs of our community. And so what I heard from 3 council members is that my suggestion was, and we'll need staff to kind of direct this, but there are 3 things I think that need to be done. One is, and I'm not sure, Mr. Beatty, what that language would be, but withdrawing support or whatever legal language we would need to withdraw that support for the White Bear alternative. And also, we have to do a withdrawal, clear withdrawal from support for the Vento Trail, because I understand that from the Met Council's perspective, the Vento Trail was still in play. And so we would have to do something formal with that as well. And to Councilmember Juniman's point too, and I think Councilmember Cave and myself want to direct staff to meet with Metro Transit and continue the discussion about other alternatives. And we can throw in such as microtransit, letter bus lines, and even autonomous transit, and other options as they may present themselves. So I see that there are three things, and I don't know, Mr. Beatty, if you want to comment on it, or Mr. Sable, do we do three different things? Do we do one big thing? How would we accomplish that to be the most effective? Mr. Sable, do you want to start? Or defer to Mr.
No,
Beatty?
thank you, Mayor and council members. I guess I'm looking alternatively at the city clerk and the city attorney. I think there's, between us, we're going to have to go back and rewatch the tape to make sure that we get the language correct. I think the real question becomes, if there are three things, if you have three separate resolutions, are they standalone items and that they would want independent votes for them?
Yeah.
Or would you want them to be, so you could say, right, I might support one but not the other, and you are given the option.
Yeah.
Or if you do one resolution with three resolving clauses, then there would only be one vote. I think that's really a question for the governing body, is if you have strong opinions on one point versus another, I think that might factor in how we would write it up, and I'm looking at the city attorney.
Mr. Beatty, just so that it's clear.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Council, I think in the best of all possible worlds, a single resolution would be the best solution. But as the city manager says, that will require at least three of you to agree on what that resolution includes. And what I've heard is withdrawal of support or rescission of support, however we decide to articulate it, for Bruce Vento, the same for White Bear, and some sort of language that says, but we're not walking away from transit in general. We want to continue to engage. I think if we can wrap that into a single resolution, that would be best. But again, at least three of you are going to have to agree with that package of language.
I would agree to that. Councilmember Cave?
Yes.
Councilmember Juniman? Three of us would agree to that.
Then, Madam Mayor, Council, we can certainly, we collectively, I'm speaking I now, I guess for the city manager as well, we can take a crack at such a resolution.
Mr. Sable?
I have learned enough in my career that trying to write on the fly is never a good suggestion. And so if you would allow us a little bit of time, we could prepare something for the next meeting.
Certainly.
I think that would be probably a simpler way rather than to try to craft something on the fly.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Madam
Right.
Mayor, Council, I was not suggesting that we
We're not
do
doing it tonight, no. We're still in a workshop, so we aren't going to take any vote or anything. This really was about giving direction on where do we want to go with this. Okay? All right. Councilmember Villavicencio.
I'm going to recuse my comments.
Okay? Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I ask the council, when we put that together, instead of putting it all in one, if we can put it into three separate resolutions instead?
Mr. Sable.
As staff, we can certainly do that. I think there's another option is if it were in one resolution, a body can ask for the items to be divided, and so you might get the same effect, whether it's one resolution or three resolutions. I don't know that the net effect changes, so we'll work, I think maybe Ron and I and, city attorney and the city clerk and I will prepare maybe two versions and just to flesh out what's the best format.
Thank you.
I think that would be good, thank you. Okay, all of the lights are off, and we are going to conclude our workshop. There's no other business, so we're going to adjourn, and we'll take a 5-minute break and come back and start our council meeting. We're adjourned.